Hello, hello, and welcome back to Bearing Birth, a birth story podcast highlighting the emotional impact of birth, the immediate postpartum period, and the years beyond. I'm Sophie, a perinatal mental health therapist.
And I'm Jordan, a doula specializing in postpartum support. Today we are sharing a very special 1-year anniversary episode.
Woohoo! We've had this podcast published for a full year now.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I feel like time flies by.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
We've done a new thing.
We've come so far. I feel like it's such a special project, and I'm so grateful that you asked me to be a part of it and that it happened. And I feel like it was kind of, I don't know, it felt maybe out of character for us all to be like, should we just buy the equipment and try? Mm-hmm. And we did it.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we'll just return it if we don't like it.
And now here we are over a year later with, this equipment that we've learned to set up. Well, Sasha sets it up for us. But
I don't quite remember now because I haven't done it in a long time.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah, shout out to Sasha because she helps out a lot. What has this podcast meant to you? Like, what do you take personally from this podcast?
Oh, so much, honestly. I feel like, obviously, thinking about the idea of doing a birth story podcast while working in the field of birth work made sense on paper. But I don't think I quite understood like what it would bring to me as a birth worker and just like as a person in general. I think that I was kind of nervous about how I would do, like, how am I going to respond to someone who's here to share a story with me? How do I help them feel comfortable? How do I help guide them to, tell their story in a way that works on a podcast? Like, in hindsight, you don't. They just tell the story. Yeah. How am I going to sound? Like, is it going to feel like something I enjoy? And I think I don't worry about any of that anymore. Like, of course, like the first couple of times it was just like, oh, am I saying the right things? But that passed so quickly. And I feel like I was able to really learn how to be present with someone who's sharing something so important. And I learned a lot about how to hold space and how to listen. And I've totally brought that into my work and into just my life in general. So it has meant so much to me in that way.
Yeah, you've learned a lot of skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, very similarly. There's like the technical skills of learning how to produce and edit and organize a podcast. Mm-hmm. That has been, I just like know how much work goes into it now. And
yeah, that is something we didn't know we were signing up for necessarily.
Right. And I think it's really cool that we had this idea and we were like, oh yeah, we're going to invest so much of our time and energy. I mean, this is the passion for both of us. Mm-hmm. And to invest time and money and energy feels really cool after over a year and a half now.
Yeah. It feels worth it.
Did anything
for sure.
For a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. I start a lot of projects and I think I start a lot of projects and don't really complete them. And it's like part of me and my personality. I get interested in something and sort of have like this hyperfixation around it and then get bored of it. But this has really challenged me to use the word invigorating earlier. We had a guest on that asked, does this project feel like work for you? And you said, no, it feels, well, yeah, it feels
like work and
it's invigorating.
It invigorates me. Yeah. It gets me excited. Like every time we finish with a guest, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is what it's about.
Yeah. There's so much purpose and value to this. And that's been cool. And I think that's what doing it with you and with Sasha and my friends helps keep the motivation going.
I resonate with what you said about starting projects. Like I have plenty of unfinished projects, plenty of unfinished books. And I think you even mentioned that, like when you were like, I want to do this, but I can't do it by myself.
No
and
way.
It feels like, yeah, having it be a thing that we're all doing together makes it, yeah, we're accountable to each other, not just ourselves. And like, we're not like making money on this. We're not like reaching like thousands and thousands of people, but like, it doesn't matter.
No.
It's so, I feel like we're getting so much out of it regardless.
Yeah. So much connection to other people. And I'm just so naturally curious, and you are too, to somebody else's story, especially around birth. And it would be great if there was a lot of listeners, of course. My ego
we'll
wants
get there,
that.
maybe
Maybe we'll get there. But it just means so much that it touches the one person, the guest that sits across from us, that they feel like this is so valuable.
Yeah. And I feel like we went into it with that understanding that like this is important, but I think really seeing how like what it does for the people that come on has just proved that over and over, that it's like, it's important and it's special. And like, sometimes they don't realize how much they'll appreciate it until they're sitting there after we've talked for 2 hours about their story. And it's like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the power of storytelling. It's so connecting. And I've met so many really cool people. You've introduced me to some really great connections.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
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 It's so cool.
I've also reconnected with friends that I've lost touch with. Like someone I went to middle school reached out and wants to come on. And that's cool. Yeah.
And we've had a guest on who just found us on her own, which is amazing.
That's
we haven't published her episode yet, but
podcast accomplishment. Yeah.
Oh, so special. Do you feel like we'll be sitting here in another year talking about our 2-year anniversary?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Don't even say it, or are we going to end?
I know. We're not going to end now. Never.
No, I think it's, if life ever comes to a point where this project doesn't serve us or fulfills us, then it's okay to say that's the project end time. But I certainly don't feel like that way.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's coming on the horizon. I feel like I have interest in continuing the project, and I know I have more to keep learning from it and more amazing connections to be made.
Yeah. So we were looking back at the guests that we've had on, and we've had a total of 14 guests.
Wow.
Sharing their birth stories, including myself. So that's 15. But
that's a lot.
I'm really grateful to everybody.
Stories. Yeah, me too.
Is there a guest that, something that's really memorable as you sit here right now? I mean, everybody's story is memorable in some way.
Yeah, they really are. Gosh, I don't know if one in particular like stands out more than the others. I just feel like it's so well-rounded. I feel like I really appreciated having Garrett and Jules on and having like the perspective from
a couple.
Yeah, the two people experiencing this in two very different ways. I really appreciated having one of my closest friends on. Io came on, and like I was very involved in their birth, but like hearing it told again was such a different experience than sort of like being there and being a part of it. And then I, like you mentioned, all the people that came on that like you have introduced me to, like, I don't know, there's just so many cool perspectives and so many different stories. And I really like so many of them. I can't pick anything that stands out really.
Yeah. Same here. What's important is that they all have something that's really relatable and deeply human that I can connect to. And just the range of emotion that has to do with birth and being a parent, like fear and feeling empowered and feeling confused and just the overwhelm, just being able to put that out there and hear everybody, how they sort of navigate that is really helpful.
Yeah. And it's so vulnerable. Like it's not, these conversations are not going to happen in this way unless we facilitate like that happening.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is probably part of the reason why it feels like invigorating and exciting, because it's like, wow, what a real raw conversation about something huge. Like you don't have that, especially with people you've never met before otherwise.
Yeah, it is a little feels a little strange. I'm somewhat used to this having therapy clients. You meet them and you go into some deep stuff pretty quickly, but to sit across from someone you've never met and they go into sharing this really intense experience and then to come out, we go through this journey together. And at the end, I'm like, I just want to be friends with you and hang out with you. Can we share numbers?
Yeah. It does feel like a journey. I feel like, especially, you put the headphones on, you're just hearing your voices. And then you're like, I don't know about you, but I'm just like, I have like images of things the way they're described. And I'm like I'm pretty empathetic. I know you are too. I feel like I can like really feel the feelings that they express and describe. So I'm sort of like on that journey with them as they relive it. And then we take the headphones off and like the world sounds different. And we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
We re-emerged on the other side of this journey.
Yeah, the guests say they take something with them, but we take things with us too.
For sure.
After these stories are shared. It's been really healing for me in my postpartum birth processing and just being a parent. Yeah.
I think that's going through that, an experience like you did seems to make a lot of people like look into finding ways into like, how can I support other people in this birth world? Or, you know, like, can I be a doula? Or I don't know, something related to being involved in like the process for other people as a way of healing. And like, this is one of those ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's really, I feel grateful that your journey led you to this, which led me to this.
Yeah. Thinking about that now, there's a lot of good that came from my traumatic birth experience story. And there's so much good in this podcast and connecting and other people sharing too. Can you remember back to what our mission was at the beginning of coming up with this podcast?
Put me on the spot. I think to have like a platform for the healing journey of storytelling and how it can help people feel more connected to others. It can help people process an experience in a different way by expressing it in the form of storytelling, and to have something for people to listen to and maybe like find relatable stories that they might not otherwise hear, to feel less alone in whatever they're experiencing or might experience in the future. That's what I remember.
I think we've stayed pretty true to that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I'm proud of us.
Me too. Yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for thinking of the idea. What is your favorite part about doing the podcast?
Definitely meeting the people we get to talk to.
Yeah.
And getting to be creative in this way.
It is creative. Yeah. I miss that in my life. Creativity. I feel like you have to make it happen. Like we just talked about in this intro, like, is this work or does this feel like work? And yes. And I think if you don't leave room and like intentionally make time in your life for creative projects, whether they are work or not, it's not going to happen. And I think that you can really lose out on the benefits of being creative.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a project that feels like it fills that cup and is also very realistic for where I'm at in my life.
Yeah.
Both of us work and do a lot of caretaking. So what are some goals that you have as a podcast host going into this next year?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I'm always striving to like, well, I was going to say I always feel like I'm trying to learn to be better at like listening and holding space. And I don't say that because I think that like, oh, I really need to improve necessarily, but I know that I will keep improving in that. And also like, it would be really great to have some more listeners.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, it's never been about that. Like that's never been like our goal. But of course, you know, we're making this with this purpose that we created. And I feel like for people to hear that, like that is what we want. We want to be able to reach people with it. And that is one thing that would be nice. And, you know, maybe we'll have time to put a little more effort into getting more listeners, and maybe not because we're busy.
Yeah.
But I feel like I feel happy regardless. And I think because we have like a lower number of listeners, it's like every person who takes the time to spend time listening, I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, it's really meaningful.
Yeah, I have friends from like all walks of life that have listened, and some who I would have never expected, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any other specific goals for year 2?
We talked a little bit about in the episode that we put out where I share my birth story at the end. We were reflecting a little bit. And I'm going to be like really intentional about giving more of myself and not being afraid to be who I am. Or I'm like hesitant to share more about me because I'm a therapist, and sometimes there's like a worry of is it appropriate or not, or in what way will my disclosure impact clients?
Right.
But I'm a human as well before being a therapist, and this is so. I know that when I'm sharing more about myself and you're sharing more about yourself, it does facilitate more connection.
Yeah,
and
I totally
authenticity.
agree. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a therapist, so it's not as heavy of a decision, but I feel the same way. I feel like if I think about podcasts I enjoy listening to, it's like you're learning about these people whose voices are in your headphones, and that makes you want to keep listening because you know more about them. You're connected to them, and it really feels like, like some people talk about how if you're in a conversation, if you're like commenting on how someone's story, how you can relate to it too much, it's like, oh, you should just be listening and like not doing that. But I feel like that's so not true. Like, I feel like that's how you connect with people.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see on the guest's face, like when one of us really resonates and then shares why we resonate with something they said, like they're so, I don't know, there's like joy there, there's connection there. And I think that's special. And
I notice it puts them at ease too. They relax a little bit more.
Yeah, because they're not so on the spot. Like, this is only about you.
Yeah. It's about them in a way, but it's about all of us, about the collective experience of birth and how we all, and being a parent and our birth workers and in that space.
Yeah. What is the experience of this whole universe of birth?
Yeah, especially in the modern world today with all the layers that affect us. Now what's cool too is that there's like all these different types of podcasts. Some of them are detective shows or murder mysteries or really factual based, or they have a guest come on that has an expertise in something. And I really we have no idea where we're going to go when we sit with somebody in the beginning. And it's really about a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite
exciting
things to listen to for sure.
Yeah. So we don't have a new guest episode that we're sharing today, a new birth story, but we thought we'd want to honor 1 year of the podcast being out there for the world by putting it back on our guests that we've had before and sharing the advice that everybody has given at the end of their story.
Yeah, I'm really excited to actually put all of this advice in one digestible place.
Yeah.
I was just saying with our guest that we had today, I was sort of reflecting on the question that we asked to get this advice and how it seems like a simple question, like, oh, what advice would you give someone who's about to give birth? But like, it really, the advice they give is like a culmination of everything that this person experienced, and like what is the most important thing that stands out to them that they think, if I share a little piece of this experience with someone else, maybe it'll make their experience easier. Yeah. And it's so special. And our guest that we were just talking with kind of made an interesting point that like she might have had a completely different answer if she didn't just sit here and talk through her whole birth experience. And so she had like this unique perspective in answering that question. And I think that's really cool. Like, I don't think I thought of, I don't know, the gravity of being like, let's ask everybody this question, but I feel like I'm so glad we decided to.
Yeah. And to go back to what her worry was of, is my story going to be interesting enough? Well, the advice that she gives is so unique and specific to her story that you can't give that without going through the whole story.
Yeah.
And it's so important, the entire context of what she's been through and all of the guests have been through and coming to that advice.
Yeah. And you would think there wouldn't be so many types of advice. I guess that's not true, but I think that while there's similar themes that come up in people's advice, their path to like coming to how they got to a place where they wanted to offer that as advice is always so different. And that makes their advice unique in so many different ways. And I guess maybe I wasn't expecting that. I don't know. I guess I wasn't really expecting any certain outcome out of asking that question. But I feel like it's just been really cool to hear people's advice, and I'm excited to just be able to listen to all of it. It's just going to be like this like juicy episode of some really good advice.
Yeah, it's going to be powerful. Yeah, and to hear everybody that we've had on and had the opportunity to meet back to back like that, it'll be really cool.
I also think it's just really cool and exciting that it's like a snapshot for us of like what the year was.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, have you had the urge to go back and listen to any of them?
Oh, for
Again?
sure. Yeah. I haven't done it yet.
Me neither. But I know that there will be a time
Yeah.
where, and I've thought about conversations that I've had, not the episode, but sitting down with the guest, I've thought about, oh yeah, they said this and that applies right now for me.
Yeah. And you can go back and hear it.
Yeah, I can. It's cool.
Yeah. Like how often are you recording your like conversations?
Yeah. It's like being a fly on the wall for a conversation we had years ago now, or, you know, it's cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, congratulations to you, to us, to everybody.
And
thank you to the guests.
Thank you. I want to say like, thank you. So
I don't know why I'm so awkward.
I mean, that everybody's awkward. I think it's important to say thank you so much to everyone who has been vulnerable with us and like taken the time to come here, sit with us, tell their story, and like get into the nitty-gritty details. It means so much to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel, Io, Courtney, Kaylee, Livy, Edith, Garrett and Jules, Emily, Anna, Bria, Rose, Janelle, Ryan, and Rashida. Thank you all.
And Sophie.
And me.
Yeah, seriously, it's so special that you were all on this journey with us for our year one of this cool project.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who
listens too.
who takes the time to listen.
Yeah, and gives feedback and wants to come on and shares. That's the power of storytelling as well, and listening. So enjoy this episode with all of our guests that you might have already heard from, hopefully.
And if not, maybe you'll go back and listen.
Yeah, hopefully it inspires you to go listen to the longer episode.
Enjoy.
A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth.
I think for people who are planning on giving birth or about to give birth, I think I would circle back to the being open-minded part and then find funny things the whole time that is happening. Stay connected with your partner as much as you can, or someone close to you, friend, or just someone you feel warm with that will keep you grounded.
I think my advice is probably twofold. My first advice would be to just whatever they can do to deeply believe that they are worthy of support and care themselves, and to try and line that up for themselves however they can. If they have the resources to hire support like a doula, amazing. That's not everyone, but even if it's like having neighbors who are there to check on you or anything, any way that you can receive support yourself, I just think it's critical. Again, because so much emphasis is put on the birth. Like, I really just like to try and shift that into like, let's make sure you have a plan for that first 3 months after at least. And then second would be just to invite people or encourage them to not be afraid to explore their own inner world as well, because I think birth is one of the very few extremely powerful, almost a portal, like a very powerful moment in your life where you transform. And it's really cool to see, to like let yourself go through that process and to see what you become on the other side, but just staying open to that and just reminding it's like anything beautiful comes from a dark place. If you think of flowers and they're in their seed and they're under the ground and they have to like, all that energy builds up and they burst forth and they become this gorgeous flower. And the same with butterflies and the same with birds and all these amazing things that have transformed, right? And I think it's just recognizing and like giving yourself grace when you're in the dark, confusing parts, because that's part that you have to have that part as well. Just being connected to all these other things that are so incredible in the world. Like you can remind yourself there's so much beauty and magnificence on the other side if you can just kind of go through the process.
For me, the biggest thing that I needed to prepare or help preparing for was my own feelings with the uncertainty. Like we have to be okay with knowing that even if everything is going according to plan, or if everything's going totally crazy chaos, nothing's going according to plan. At the end of the day, in those situations, all we can control is how we react to them. So in preparing for giving birth, try to prepare the emotional part. Try to be prepared to be unprepared. Because it is like you can have all of the things and have your special socks or whatever special, music you have in the background, whatever it is, whatever tools you need, you still have to be prepared to be unprepared and to be okay when things go wrong. Because I think that's where we all lose it, of we prepare all of these things. We think we go into situations emotionally prepared for them, but we're only prepared for the things that we think are going to happen. And we have to be okay. And the only reason I say that is because you don't want to look back on whatever happens during your birth story and regret, not being in the moment because you're so wrapped up in, oh, it's not going according to plan. Because it is, like, it's the memories from those days are ingrained. I don't know. I have never met somebody that's given birth that didn't remember that day down to, specific details. And, think about future self and what you want to look back on. Do you want to look back on, just totally losing it because things didn't go according to plan, or just kind of going with the flow, which is huge, right? Because it's scary. It's things not going according to plan are life and death,
The word presence keeps coming up in my mind right now, that the more with the moment you're in you can be, the more like water you can be with it, like flow with what's happening. I feel like when I got really ahead of like what's going to happen, how long is this going to take, when I started like future tripping, I was brought out of coping in a way that made it more overwhelming. So anchoring to the moment was, and your people is, I think, what comes up.
So this is actually my kind of favorite little tidbit of advice, just in general, but it also really applies to this whole process. There is no such thing as control. The best, like the closest we can get to that as a human being is managing things. So just letting go of that idea that we can control anything, and like focusing on just, okay, how can I best manage this situation and navigate through it? That's a huge weight off of my shoulders, like kind of often when I remind myself of that, like, okay, it's out of my control. How do I manage this? How do I just get through it? But also frequently reminding yourself that you're doing a good job. And we don't go to school for this. We don't get formal training. We don't get years of training for this. We just figure it out.
I gave someone advice recently, our friend who's about to give birth. I told her to trust her intuition, and that no matter how it goes, no matter what happens, that you're going to be a great mom and it's going to be fine. That's really it.
I would say sleep when the baby's sleeping is fucking horseshit.
Yeah, oh my God.
And I despise any time someone says that. But besides that, what I tell someone who's expecting, I didn't birth a child, so I can't really speak to that. But I think what Michael told me the other day was pretty important. He was telling me that there's no right or wrong. I mean, sure, that take it with a grain of salt. But like as far as co-sleeping or crib training or all these things and all these opinions that so many people are like, this is right, this is wrong. And I feel like everything is just whatever works for you and your baby. Like, just do that. If the baby is happy and is full and fed and all that, then yeah. From all the opinions, I feel like we're getting a lot of opinions, which I hear all the time. It's whatever works for your family.
Find care providers that you trust and that are willing to work with your vision of what you hope to happen. That way, when things don't go quite as you expect them to be, you have built up a relationship and you trust that they are, listening to what you want and trying to work with you to find the best solution that will help get you through and end up with a happy, healthy baby.
Bring your partner water. Take all the leave you can. Bond with your child. Be intentional. Oh, that's been really hard. I've been trying to cut down on my screen time in front of my daughter. And do the diapers. If after, the baby's born, there's not a whole lot that the non-birthing partners can do, but we can do the diapers.
Get set up with a perinatal mental health therapist before you go in to the birth process and even in pregnancy, right? Because looking back, I suffered from a severe amount of anxiety in pregnancy that looking back, I really wish that I had had some additional supports around. And then, going to postpartum and being in postpartum and trying to get set up with services. Like if you're working with a perinatal mental health therapist, we all know, that if that's where you're at, that we try to get you in as soon as possible and as quickly as we can. And then there's also those logistical, practical things that have to be taken care of too. So if that can get taken care of like in pregnancy or before birth, I think that could be really helpful. So you don't have to jump through those hoops, right? So to speak, when, you're so early postpartum.
It's not so much about building up the nursery and getting all this stuff. It's about what you already have, how you can nurture yourself and your baby and your family and being creative, because your whole life changes overnight. And it's like probably around 6 months in, I realized, I'm just trying to get my old life back, or like to find myself again. But that's impossible because my whole life is different. And I can't go back to that person, but it's trying to find creative ways to find myself again in a new way. Yeah, less on things, more on what's inside. You need good burp cloths. You need good support. You need a meal train and a partner or person that can be with you and hold you and give you meals, and just while you care for this baby or babies, someone's caring for you. And then that person needs care too. It's just, I realize like the value of community and depending on others.
Trust in your gut. Yeah. Trust in your gut and going with as much as you possibly can, getting insights and getting advice and taking it all in. But in the end, sitting with that advice, sitting with what you're hearing and what people are wanting you to do and all of the things, but then ultimately trusting what your body's saying. If your body is rejecting something that someone has said, and you can feel it in your body, you can feel that like, I don't want that as much as I want this other thing. Or yes, I'm scared that I should be doing that, but your body and your baby knows, kind of the path that they want to go on. It may not happen that way, but at least go with your gut as much as possible.
Honestly, I think like we've said throughout this whole episode, a lot of the suffering, most of the suffering will occur in the mind. Because if I wasn't scared during the pain in my body, it would have been much less suffering. I was scared in that moment, right? If I could tell anyone, it's like, do your absolute best not to get stuck in the mind fantasies of what's going to happen, not to ask or compare your journey about what could happen with anyone else's, because it will be something that your mind cannot come up with right now, right? So stay as present as you can. And if you are going to daydream, do your best to think about the best possible outcome or one that would feel good for you. Like dream about that. It's a big practice, but do your best. Do your best.
I will just say one thing. When people tell you to trust yourself, it seems like it could be really easy to trust yourself, but it's not. And that's okay. So if you're looking inward and trying to trust yourself and not finding the answers, that's okay too. And that your birth will not be what you think it will be, no matter what.
Let your birth surprise you. And I don't mean like just be prepared for anything, because that can cause a lot of anxiety. But what I mean is if you're thinking about your birth a lot ahead of time, like I did, it's okay to think about all the different possibilities that could play out. But then set those aside and allow yourself to have space for things that you just don't anticipate. And trust yourself. Trust that your body and your baby are going to come into this world the way they need to. That was a big thing that didn't become clear to me until after the fact, was that, birth is like, it's like a dance between two people. Yeah, my body is pushing this baby out, but my baby is also an active role in this process. And so I would just say birth is mysterious, and that might sound kind of woo-woo to people, but if you let it, it can surprise you in very meaningful, powerful ways.
Bearing Birth is available on all major podcast streaming services. We invite you to subscribe as well as follow us on Instagram at Bearing Birth Podcast.